you for joining us today. I'm Michelle Storer. I am a Senior Business Director at Hayes, based in the Midlands, but working with schools nationally. Thank you for joining us, and a warm welcome to Paul Green, who's going to be leading the webinar for us this afternoon. Worked with Paul on and off for about 15 years. He's head teacher at Linghall School in Coventry. He has been involved in some hugely innovative, impressive work around trauma-informed schooling, supporting inclusion, equity, and all the good stuff around supporting students and improving the life chances of the children in his care. So I've always been really evangelical about the work that I'm aware of that Paul and his team have been doing at Linghall School, and always talking to head teachers and colleagues about the sort of strategies that they have adopted over the years, and felt that it was something that we would be really, really keen to share with a wider audience. Constantly being asked for training from our own staff that work for us around trauma-informed schooling, adverse childhood experiences, that sort of thing. So hopefully you'll learn a lot today, and this session will be really, really useful for you. With that in mind, like I say, I'm going to monitor the chat. If anybody has any questions or comments, then please feel free to put them in the box towards the end of the session. I'll be able to share your questions with Paul, and hopefully get some an exchange of some great ideas and information for you this afternoon. So without further ado, happy to hand over to Paul.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll now going to attempt the sharing screen thing. Let's see if that works. Michelle, has that worked?
That is right. You good?
Excellent. Well, I'd like to say it's nice to see you all, but obviously I can't. But it's nice to know that you're all out there somewhere. And thank you for giving up the time to listen to me. Can I just ask people to mute themselves, just in case we don't want any sort of strange interruptions? I'm sure you've all experienced that over the last 2 years. When we've been working online. So my name is Paul Green, head teacher at Linghall, been here since 2003. So what I'm really talking about tonight isn't something that's happened overnight. It's something that's developed over a long period of time. It's an evolution, really. And the fact of the matter is, the reason for doing it, the primary reason for doing it, is to improve outcomes, basically. Our school is in the most socioeconomically deprived catchment area in Coventry, and I think it's high up on the list of socioeconomically deprived catchment areas in the country. And so, you know, to get the really good academic results for the kids is challenging. And my entire career as a head teacher has been followed, if you like, by people questioning why my results aren't better than they are. And actually, the fact is, our results have got better and better. And this is part of the reason, and I think a significant part of the reason. In order to explain all of that, I do need to spend a little bit of time talking about our understanding of how children's memories work, and then a little bit of time talking about the impact that trauma has on children's capacity to learn. And then I'll talk about what we put in place to try and resolve that problem. Because the driving principle behind all of this is that we came to an understanding that the issues that were affecting the children, a lot of children who come to the school, were actually preventing them from learning. So it wasn't a case of the children not wanting to learn. Actually, it was an understanding that it was very difficult for them to learn, and we needed to address that issue if we were going to make any real progress with them. And so the first thing really is just a very quick recap, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, about how children's memory, or how all of our memories work, actually. And so it's to do with the capacity of the short-term memory. That this was an area that we wanted to focus on because it was clear to us that you teach stuff. I'd long been used to the fact that I could deliver a fantastic assembly and half an hour later, everybody had forgotten it. But more crucially, in a lesson, you're teaching really important material and you need the kids to remember it. And so understanding the capacity of the short-term memory was really quite important. And that, of course, is the first thing. Short-term memory does have a finite capacity. It is like a vessel that can be filled. And once it's full, it's full. And there's not a lot you can do about that. And so information comes into the short-term memory. The real key then is to get that information fixed into the long-term memory, because once it's in the long-term memory, it stays there. Although information is forgotten after an indeterminate period of time, if it's not revisited. So the trick is to get information into the short-term memory, which does have a finite capacity, and then get that information into the long-term memory. And the best way to do that is with all the revisiting, relearning strategies that we've all become familiar with over time. So with that in mind, if we look at the working memory, then in fact, we can divide the working memory up into 4 distinct things. So if you pose a child with, or any of us with, a challenge, then the difficulty of that challenge becomes the intrinsic load. That takes up some capacity in the working memory. The more difficult the activity, the task, or the thing that you're being required to understand, the more space the intrinsic load will take up. Then we've got the extraneous load. Now, the extraneous load is all the other stuff that's going on in your world that is occupying your working memory. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that can occupy the extraneous load are things that have got nothing to do with the issue about which you're trying to learn. So if you're worried about things, if you're suffering from any sort of anxiety, stress, worry, things like that, they will add to the extraneous load in the working memory. And of course, are taking up valuable space that you want to be available for the germane load, which is the space within the working memory that is used to process the challenge, the problem, the intrinsic load. So in reality, anything that's left is free capacity. But in reality, what you want is to maximize the amount of capacity within the working memory to focus on the processing of the task. So intrinsic load and germane load essentially are the things you want in your working memory, the space to perform those tasks. You want to minimize the extraneous load. And you all know yourselves that this is true, because if you're worried, anxious, stressed, or whatever, it's very difficult for you to concentrate or learn as effectively as you can when you're not, basically. So if we look at the working memory, the capacity of the working memory of 2 different people here. One is a person suffering from normal levels of stress and trauma, and the other one is somebody suffering from a significant and ongoing stressful or traumatic situation. You can see the difference. So germane load is where the learning is taking place. So the intrinsic load in both cases is exactly the same. The extraneous load for the person under a normal stress level is quite small, and that leaves large capacity within the working memory for the processing of the task. So learning can take place and that information moves into the long-term memory. Look at the situation for the other person, somebody suffering from significant stress or trauma, and you can see that a large amount of the capacity within the working memory is taken up by that extraneous load, leaving very little capacity, and in some cases none at all, for the intrinsic load, the challenge, the task to be processed, and therefore learning won't take place. And that isn't a choice. And this is an important part of the whole thing. So the first important concept that I'd like to get across here is that we're not talking about choice. So these children who are suffering from toxic stress or trauma, they're not choosing not to learn. They don't have a choice. They actually don't have the capacity to learn. And understanding that starts to help with the solution. So this stress response that we're talking about actually is is a chemical response. It's the production of cortisol, it's the production of adrenaline, both of which are designed to be produced in very small quantities under very specific conditions. But for some children who are suffering from adverse childhood experiences or traumatic experiences, or are worried about, for example, whether their parents are still going to be at home when they get home in the evening. Are we going to be evicted? You know, my parents have got a gambling problem, a drug problem. I've got no friends. I'm being bullied. All of those sort of things. These are creating a traumatic stress response in the child, which results in the production of adrenaline and cortisol in far greater quantities and for much longer periods of time than they were ever designed to be produced for. And that actually produces some significant physiological symptoms in children, such as, for example, needing to go to the toilet quite a lot. So it's no surprise that if we start to put a chain of events together, you know, there are some children who seem to need to go to the toilet a lot. They're often the children that are most challenging. That's because they're the children who are most likely to be suffering from these sort of conditions. So they're not just trying to get out of your lessons. They do have a reason for it. And so here are some of the most common symptoms of high cortisol levels that we might see in children. And if you look at these, you know, these are things that we can recognize in the children that we teach. And in fact, they do have life-changing, they have a life-changing impact over a long period of time. So if we don't address some of these issues, not only do the children not learn, but in later life, there are going to be health complications that are resulting from these high levels of adrenaline and cortisol. That is significant. And so there are some of those longer term health problems are those there. And certainly we see in our adult population within the community of the school, that there's something like average life expectancy is about 10 years lower than the rest of the city. And it's often related to some of these issues. So this is more than just a school issue in all honesty, but for us, a significant issue for the children that we work with. These are the most common adverse childhood experiences, and that it's become quite common now. People are much more aware of these than was perhaps the case. But it's also true that these accumulate. So the more of these that you've got going on in your world, in your life, the more significant the trauma you're experiencing, the more significant the stress levels you're going to be experiencing, the more difficult it's going to be for you to learn for all the reasons that we've talked about so far. These are other issues that will complicate things for you in terms of learning. If you're being bullied, if you're experiencing homelessness, if you're a refugee, if you've moved into the, you know, if you're a migrant family, migrant child, if you're worried about violence within your community, and that's quite a big issue for a lot of children now, if you're looked after, if surviving a disaster, and a very significant group, if you, and some of us have children in our schools who are undergoing multiple surgeries or treatment for long-standing medical conditions, that is quite naturally a stressful situation, but also living with a parent who is suffering from traumatic stress as well. So all of those things, and these are quite common events. They'll be common in all of our schools, and we've all got children who are suffering from these things to some degree or another. Now, a couple of things that we have to bear in mind. So first thing is that although these things are happening, children don't all respond to this in exactly the same way. But what should be happening by now is we're starting to think about children's behavior, and we're starting to think about children's capacity to learn as something that is almost a clinical issue. And it's not something that children are choosing to do. They're not being lazy. They're not being, you know, this child's a bit of a fusspot, or this child's got no aspirations or motivation. This isn't a choice. This is a physiological issue. And that in turn should help us to stop thinking about how we deal with the poor behavior that is associated with a lot of these issues. So we're no longer punishing children for making a choice to misbehave. Instead, we're recognizing that there is an issue that we need to understand, diagnose, and resolve, so that the children's behavior and their capacity to learn and their engagement with our lessons will come back into a more normal framework. And part of the problem is that we need all of these things that I've listed there for good learning to take place. Without these, we're not going to get good learning. And these are exactly the things that are damaged by trauma and stress. Another hugely important behavior that's required in school is the ability to self-regulate emotions and the ability to self-regulate our behavior. And for a lot of the children that we're talking about, one of the great impacts of cortisol and adrenaline is that it puts your emotions on a hair trigger. You know, adrenaline is designed to help you escape from a life-threatening situation. It is fine-tuning all your nerves and all your emotions to get ready to run. And so if you're suffering from an excess of cortisol and adrenaline over a long period of time, then all of your emotions are on a bit of a hair trigger. So whereas for us, a small thing might happen that is fairly trivial, for a child whose emotions are on a hair trigger, that might just be enough to tip them to the point where a table goes over, a door gets slammed, somebody gets sworn at, and so on. So that ability to self-regulate is really important. But in order to do that, we need to reduce the levels of stress. And critically, these things affect the prefrontal cortex of the brain. The prefrontal cortex of the brain is associated with all those things that I've put in that diagram there. And unfortunately, if you look at those things, they're all things that we need children to be able to do successfully if they're going to learn properly at school and behave appropriately within school and the community. So the good news is that although these traumatic experiences inhibit the development of the brain, so again, we're coming back to an actual physiological condition, we have to accept that if we don't do anything about it, those vital functions are never going to be achieved. But the brain is hugely responsive. So if we do the right things in school, we can actually make a huge difference. And we can actually repair some of the damage. But it is just worth bearing in mind. If you look at the left-hand side, we've got trauma. And as you go across this diagram, you end up with the issues on the right-hand side, which are the sort of possible implications of children suffering from trauma. And these are the things that you would see them doing. And these are all things that we see in our most vulnerable children in school. These are all things that we see in our children who tend to get excluded. These are all things that we see in our children who are at the margins of what we consider to be socially acceptable behavior and so on. And it's all related to the physiological response to stress and trauma. So I want you to consider this, okay? As I've just said, teachers and other adults, all the research is very clear. Teachers and other adults of importance to the child can have a hugely important healing effect. Now, the important bit of what I said there was teachers and other adults who are of importance to the child. So you've got to make yourself important to the child in order to have that tremendous healing effect. And the way we respond to children is a crucial part of that. But I'm just going to show you, share a few things with you that look at this, right? That I think this is pretty standard on just about every school website in the country. Same as also true at Linghall. You know, uncompromising aspirations for every individual individual. For our school, we want to be exceptional, inspirational, blah, 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 lifelong learners. And we're going to achieve this through all those fantastic things. But is that true? You see, I would say that really only applies to well-behaved children who have no issues. We supported parents to go the extra mile, blah, blah, blah. That's the truth. For a lot of children, and here's a real test, is would they recognize that within their school environment? Let me put it another way. So early childhood trauma tends to produce one of these three responses. You'll be familiar with that, the whole fight, flight, freeze scenario. You know, these are our most challenging children. These are some of the responses that we get from them. Let's look at it another way. Where you've got kids in school who don't read very well, we help them to read. That's what we do. We're teachers. Where we've got children who aren't very good at maths, then we help them to do better at maths, right? What about children who are not very good at managing their emotions? What do we do with them? Well, the reality is we tend to punish them rather than saying, what do we need to do to address the issue of their inability to emotionally regulate? We tend to punish them. And of course, what that does is it reinforces the problem. It actually makes the problem worse. So child suffering from stress and trauma and so on, struggling to emotionally regulate, we punish them, increasing the levels of trauma and stress and further increasing their ability or inability to emotionally regulate. And so the response we get from the child, if we go about this in the wrong way, is to make the situation worse rather than better, which ought to be our aim. And just to reinforce that with another reference to sort of chemical stuff going on in the brain, we've got these three systems that work in tandem within our brains, which we need to get into some sort of balance. And for most of us, they are in balance, with different ones operating more or less at different times. So the drive system is about us wanting to achieve things. We're driven to go after our ambitions. We want to make progress. We're very focused. And that's associated with the production of a chemical called dopamine. We then have the soothing system, which keeps us calm, contented, safe. Again, when the soothing system is working properly, we're getting the production of oxytocin principally. But then we have the threat system. And for a lot of the children that we're talking about now, the threat system is in control. And this is where the adrenaline, the cortisol is being produced. And primarily it's producing within these children feelings of anxiety, fear, anger, disgust, basic emotions, with very little scope for that to be improved, unless we can activate the other systems. And so, frankly, if you could imagine that the threat system in control, how are you going to help those children to become aspirational? That system just isn't operating. And so really you've got to work on activating the soothing system so that the children feel more contented, safer, more protected, cared for, and so on. Then you can move more into getting them to have feelings that are more associated with ambition and so on. You just simply can't jump from one to the other. So what does that mean? Okay, so now I'm really going to talk about what we do, okay, in terms of how we improve so it's all about the school environment now. It's all about the relationships with the children. So just simple physical things, first of all, calming color schemes throughout the school. I don't know if you can, well, how well you can see my background, but Michelle's been in my office and it's all pink and purple and sort of lovely. And the school is the same. It's not all pink and purple, I should say, but it is all nice and beautifully painted, lovely displays, pictures everywhere, lots of pictures of children smiling, really, really important. Classrooms really uncluttered, sense of calm, no piles of books that have slipped over onto. Funny enough, one of the ways we started, one of the things we did when we started doing all this is we gave some children some cameras and we said, go around the school and take, we had a group of kids who we said, go around the school and take loads of photos of things that you like, things that are nice within the school and things that make you feel good. And then we said to another group of children, go around the school and take photos of things that you don't like, things that make you feel a bit sad, a bit unhappy, and so on and so on. And what we did is we put all the photos from each of those groups into a collage, and it was incredible. The photographs that the children had taken about the things that they liked, when they put them into this collage, and it was hundreds of photos, it was just this beautiful array of colors, all beautiful colors in this beautiful mosaic. When we did the same with the pictures that the children had taken of the things that they didn't like, it was gray. It was pretty much just shades of gray. You know, those warm colors, that sense, the organization, the unclutteredness, really important. And then lots of clues about how to do things, how to, what's expected of me, how do I behave in certain contexts and situations. Lots and lots of visual clues. We have a very well established code of conduct that's telling children how to do things, what we're expecting them to do. It doesn't say what we don't want them to do, ever. Because otherwise, you know, it's a bit like you're carrying a tray of drinks up a flight of stairs. Somebody says to you, be careful not to trip. And immediately you start thinking about tripping. And the likelihood of you tripping is suddenly increased. You know, we don't remind the children about what we don't want them to do, ever. Lots of advance warnings. So again, if your emotions are hard, you know, on a hair trigger, then you don't want surprises. Surprises are a bad thing, because surprises, even good surprises, can turn into bad news. So lots of warnings about things that are going to happen, so that the children aren't surprised by them. In lots of ways, that's important. Even, you know, in lessons, in terms of discussions, everything, lots of warnings. We're going to do this in a minute, and think about this, blah, blah. Safe spaces where people can go. So you know that if you are in difficulty, if you're struggling with your emotions, I can go to this place and it'll be okay. Again, you know, preschools using things like Peace Island, Zen Den. We've got a shed on the field. Sounds awful. Kids go to the shed. They don't call it the shed, but the kids go to this. It is effectively a shed, I have to say. But inside, it's all painted with you know, nice colors and so on. They can go there and they can just be quiet. And there's all sorts of designated. My office is a recognized safe space. Now, that may sound bizarre. In a lot of schools, going to see the head teacher wouldn't be defined as a safe space, but the kids have identified that it is, for them, for some of them, a safe space, and therefore it is. And you know, we allow them to help us define where those safe spaces are. Getting kids to repeat back things that you've told them to do just helps to avoid that surprise and that trigger point. This slide's a bit dense, so I'm going to whip through it quite quickly. But these are some basic mistakes that we make if we're not careful. We need to, and I think a lot of this is a given, but we do need to understand, and this is so important after the lockdowns and so on. Children's chronological age, their developmental age are different. You know, most children have good intentions. They may not always translate that good intention into the right behavior. Notice things that the children are doing well. We still have boundaries and we maintain those boundaries, but we don't maintain them in an aggressive or unpleasant way. If we need to challenge behavior, we do it as something which is connected. We're learning to behave in a different way. We're not punishing. We don't use any negative language that relates to punishments. We don't talk about punishments, and we don't have anything in school that would be considered a punishment. We do all the same things that you probably do in your school, but they're not defined as punishments. They're not used as punishments. They're used as therapies and solutions in order to bring about behavioral change. We loads of praise for everything. You know, even if someone's done something disastrous and then calm down and start to behave in a different way, we would acknowledge that. Well done. Well done. We can see that you're starting to manage your behavior and so on. You know, I say this to my staff all the time. You know, the point at which we've got to be at our best is when the kids are struggling at their worst, you know. So we've got to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and we've got to be kind. Kind is really important. I'll come on to kind in a minute. Work hard with parents. Never humiliate or shame the kids, and that you can do that accidentally. Sometimes even by asking a particular child to give you the answer to a question that was really easy, just because you want them to engage, leaves them thinking, well, they only asked me that question because it was easy, and they think I'm thick. And if you're not careful, it reinforces their poor self-image. So we have to be quite careful about that. We do a lot of work involving parents, informing parents, you know, because, you know, a lot of these children also have parents who are suffering from stress and trauma as well. An important thing to remember as well, actually, is we're never disrespectful about a child's family. You know, the family might be able to see that there's all sorts of things going on in the family that are contributing to trauma and stress, but we would never be disrespectful about a child's family, because no matter how bad or difficult or challenging it is, you know, the children love their family. That is a sort of mainstay. Culturally informed and sensitive. We have 47 different ethnic groups in the school, so that's interesting. And about emotional regulation. So, crucial element, help students to learn emotional self-regulation. Unrelenting positivity and kindness. That is the mainstay of everything we do. If you were to ask all of my teachers and support staff, people in the office, site officers, everyone would tell you the most important thing at Linghall is unrelenting positivity and kindness. We're always positive, we're always kind. And that is also to each other, not just to children, I have to say. And then we always try and use language that reduces stress rather than increases it. It comes back to what I was saying before. If you're speaking, if a child has done something that you're unhappy with, and you then start shouting at them or telling them off, or in a more traditional way, you're only increasing the stress levels and making the situation more difficult rather than less. It doesn't help. So we always use language that tries to reduce stress levels rather than increase them. What that means is we don't use any negative language. It's really difficult, actually, but we don't use any negative language. We don't ever refer to punishments. Instead, we think about therapies, solutions, that sort of language. So that doesn't mean that children can do things that are unacceptable and nothing's done about it. Of course, things are done about it, but they're done about it from the perspective of, okay, that's happened. It wasn't great. Let's think about how we might have done it differently, how we can put it right, how we might have done things instead. Even to the point, for example, of saying, okay, you know, you really didn't cope very well in that lesson today. At the moment, you're not in the right frame of mind to be in the lessons with the other children. So you're going to go to the supported learning group. You're going to work with one of the support members of staff. They're going to work with you, get you back into the right state of frame of mind to go back into lessons, and then you'll go back into lessons. Other schools might call that a range of other things, but actually phrased in that positive way. And then when we say, and actually, you know, although we've got to talk to your parents about what happened, we'll also tell them about how you responded and how positively you engaged with us and how well you behaved when you went back. You know, that is all part and parcel of the process. This is difficult because schools are really good at introducing systems that cause confrontation. You know, we don't, but some schools might have an expectation, for example, that kids bring pens and pencils and all sorts of other bits of equipment to school. And if you're not careful, the start of every lesson is framed with a discussion about who hasn't got a pen and who hasn't got a pencil. We give the kids pens and pencils and whatever they need. We don't have those discussions. You know, uniform's a tricky one, but we have everyone, you know, every time a kid walks into a class who's not in the correct uniform, they don't get moaned at by a teacher because they haven't got the correct uniform on. Issues around uniform are dealt with first thing in the morning. They're done constructively, and then we move on. Lateness is also tricky because if you punish lateness, what you find is kids will not come to school. So attendance is a problem because, you know, it needs to be put in context. For example, we have children who get up in the morning, they give their siblings breakfast, they take their siblings to primary school, drop them off, excuse me, then come to school. Now they might be 10 or 15 minutes late to school, but you know, actually, when you understand the context, the issue is, well done, you're only 10 minutes late to school. You know, it could be so much worse, and yet you've been so responsible. That context is really important, and it defines everything that we're doing. Really strong, positive, self-affirming relationships are at the heart of all of this. So one of the mantras that we run through the school is, which for every member of staff, not just for the teachers, but everybody, which children come to school to see you. Because, you know, if we all think about our schools, and we've all gone into education in one form or another, it's because somebody in a school inspired us. We were going to school at some point because we wanted to be in that person's lesson, or we wanted to see that adult. So actually, it's really important that every child in the school has this person that they're coming to school to see. They want to be with those people because those people make them feel good. And it applies to everybody. My head cleaner is in full time, and you know, some of the kids call her nanny and all sorts of other things. Nothing wrong with that. It's lovely. They're finding with her that self-affirming relationship that they need, and she gives them the engagement, the attention that they need to come to school. And actually, when they go into lessons, they're more positive, they're more likely to learn because some of the issues that we've talked about earlier have been reduced. Biggest challenge was getting site officers to smile all the time. So we focus a lot on smiling. Smiling is really important. Smiling sends out a very powerful message to children. We encourage the children to smile as well. And actually, it's very difficult to fight against somebody who's smiling at you in a nice way, not in a sarcastic way. We never lose patience because that's a real sign of failure on our part as adults. We never trivialize anything. So, you know, the classic response, well, you know, there's children with far bigger problems than that. That doesn't help, honestly, and so on. But we don't overanalyze. We're not therapists, and children who need therapists get therapy. But you know, we're just doing basic things which are around being kind, being positive, and building those really strong, positive relationships with the children. So what about the adults? Okay, so the whole school has a very good understanding of how trauma impacts on learning, not just teachers, everybody. So it is about the whole school community. Oh, excuse me. How embarrassing. That was daughter number 3. That's her ringtone. So all the staff understand how trauma impacts on learning. All this, we really are careful that we're supporting the students so that they feel safe. Safety is a really crucial part of this. And, you know, we are teaching ourselves all the time to address students' needs, looking at their relationships, their, you know, all of those issues. We try and find ways to, this is also important, that this feeling of connection is crucial. We want them to feel part of the school community. So we're explicitly looking at ways to connect them to the school community. A lot of that can come from charity work. So I've explained how poor a lot of our children are and the families they come from, but we do a huge amount of charity work. They raise a huge amount of money. And what we're saying to these kids is, look what you've done. Working together, look what you've done. Look how amazing it is. Look what you've done for this charity and this charity. Work together. You can do these things for yourself. So it's a very, charity work like that is very empowering. Very collaborative, huge amount of collaboration between members of staff. You know, sharing emails, sharing ideas, sharing strategies, sharing information. You know, there's a huge network of communication going on between professionals. I mentioned that already, don't need to cover that. And so the safety issue for us, the big challenge is the bus. Actually, I think we've nailed the other areas. We've got CCTV in the toilets. Kids like that, obviously not in the toilet, but in the communal part of the toilet, there's CCTV. They like that. They like knowing that that's there. The bus is a bit of a challenge. On the bus is where they tend to meet kids from other schools and so on. But we're working on that, and I guess, you know, that's I'm glad that if there's got to be one area that we've still got to work on, I'd rather it was that one. So feeling safe academically is also important. So understanding that it's okay to make a mistake. If you make a mistake in a lesson with an answer, you're not going to be ridiculed or humiliated. Putting your hand up to answer a question when your self-esteem is quite low is a real risky thing. So, you know, we need to work hard around that. I'm reading a very good book at the moment, which is called, I've got it on my desk here, The Decisive Element, which is, it's called Unleashing Praise and Positivity in Schools. It's this book here. And they give a very good example in there of a child who gives a really daft question gives a really daft answer to a question that a teacher asks. And rather than make the child look silly, the teacher does exactly the right thing. The teacher thanks the child for their answer and thanks them and says, you know, you've eliminated that possibility. So thank you for that. Now, the rest of you know that's not the right answer. What is? You know, so you've turned it into a more positive thing. It's also worth remembering that highly attention-seeking students are also suffering quite a lot of the time from some of these stress-related conditions, because actually what they're seeking is constant reassurance that they're safe, that they're recognized, that they're okay, that you're interested. So unrelentingly positive, never giving up, calm at all times, reliable, confident, interested. These are the qualities that we need from our staff, and we reinforce that all the time. Interesting one, never outwardly anxious. We've got these things called mirror neurons, which are a way that mammals can transmit emotions to others very quickly. The classic is, I think, I've heard of wildebeest, you know, in Africa, and a lion appears on the right-hand side of the herd. The whole herd will turn almost simultaneously. Now, the wildebeest haven't been able to communicate verbally to each other that there's a lion on the right-hand side. What has been communicated is heightened levels of anxiety, which are transmitted very quickly through the herd. The herd moves away from the the anxiety that's being created. Anxiety is contagious. All of you at some point would have been in a room and said, you know, actually, that person made me feel anxious. And they do it without even realizing. And this is an area we concentrate on hard with, especially with our new teachers new to the profession. You're going to feel anxious. Of course you are. But the key is never to be outwardly anxious. And so we do a lot of work with them on how to present confidently, positively, smiling, engaging, encouraging, rather than demonstrating any of the signs that you're anxious, because it will be transmitted to the class. And if you've got children in the class who, again, are on that hair trigger of you know, trauma and so on, it can be enough to push them over the edge so that their behavior becomes much more challenging. This is a little bit about attachment. I think that's you know, a bit obvious. I'm not going to go into that too much, but it's also important to remember the important part I wanted to get to was there. Often when we're dealing with children's parents, and the response we get from parents is often not quite the response we're looking for. We're also dealing with traumatized adults. So it's very important to demonstrate all those same skills and techniques that we're using with the children with the adults. That brings the parents on board. So I'll quite often meet parents, and the meeting will start with them shouting at me about something, and then by the end of it, we're best friends. But you know, it's listening, encouraging, agreeing, empathizing, and then suggesting things, how they might be doing things differently, or and so on, and investing time in that, building up the relationship. Okay, so all of those things are school structures now that make a difference. So support staff never punish children, never talk negatively to children. Their role is exclusively there to support and advocate for children. So when a child's done something wrong or done something difficult or challenging, they can go to a member of support staff. The member of support staff will help them. What they won't do is add to the issue, and they'll help them to do the right thing. So if I've got to talk to a child about an issue, about something that they've done, a member of support staff will have worked with that child first, will have primed them, so that by the time they come to me, their anger is reduced. They've had the opportunity to reflect and think. They've been primed with certain things to say, and so on. So they're supportive to do the right thing. Trauma sensitive alternatives to sanctions. Well, like I said before, if a child has not engaged well in a lesson, we might say, you didn't engage very well today, you didn't learn as much as everybody else. That's a problem, because by next lesson you won't know as much, you know, it'll be more difficult. Come back at the end of the day, we'll spend 20 minutes with you going through the work. I'll ring your mum, tell her that you're staying, tell her that you volunteered, tell her that she should be pleased with you. 9 times out of 10, children stay. If you say to them, you've got detention tonight after school, children don't stay. And it's no surprise that where you run rigorous detention systems, that quite often it's the same kids doing the detentions every day and negotiating with people to reduce their list of detentions and stuff like that. You know, we don't have those problems. Start of the day, really important. How you're going to frame the day for the children is a crucial element, because obviously that then dictates how the rest of the day develops. Make sure that all the children belong to teams or groups. We have colleges here, so all of the students belong to different colleges, and those they work collectively to achieve points for their colleges and so on. It's competitive, but it's also related to things that they do, so they can also get points, for example, for achievement as a result of a struggle or effort. A lot of evidence, incidentally, that for these sort of children, praising effort is more important than praising academic ability. You know, that they will take more from it if you're praising the effort that they've made to get to a certain point. Charity work I've talked about, a lot of student leadership responsibilities, outrageous opportunities. You know, for a lot of these children, we need to show them that they can do the same as everybody else. So we've pre-lockdown, and we've just really started these things back up again. Kids have gone to the Houses of Parliament. We've managed to secure them lunch at the palaces of different ambassadors and stuff like that. They go to universities, engage in debating competitions. We've got a really good debating groups here. And, you know, our kids are great at debating because they've got loads of experience. They've had lots of things in their life which they can draw on to if you focus it, to argue and debate really successfully. So they win debating competitions. During lockdown, we've engaged with other schools in terms of conversations and collaborative activities in India, in Africa, in all sorts of places, something that we will continue post lockdown. The sort of world has opened up in terms of the dialogue for our children. And, you know, the more of those sort of outrageous opportunities we can give them, the better. We had a student did a work experience at the CERN laboratory in Switzerland, for example. All sorts of things. And of course, we celebrate their achievements. We publish their success. Also true for staff. Every 2 weeks, we publish a sharing success document, which is produced by the staff. Each senior leader takes it in turn, but it's a collection of anecdotal information. It's a collection of teaching strategies. It's just ideas and things that have happened in the last 2 weeks that have been really successful and which we want to publish and celebrate. And of course, positive social behavior, really, really very, very important. So 3 things all children need: affection, attention, affirmation. I think that we're providing all of those things within the environment I've described. These are the most often, if I'm going to get challenged by people, these are the things they say to me most often. They say, but actually we need to focus on academic attainment, not relationships. I'd have to say, if you really still think that, you weren't listening to me. Children need to know the difference between right and wrong. Children know the difference between right and wrong. You know, they always know the difference between right and wrong, and sometimes we just got to help them make the right choices. This is a really common one. We need a really clear sanctions policy. Punishment should fit the crime. I don't consider that most behavior in school is criminal, but there we are. But equally, we do everything contextually. So you've got to understand the reason why things happen. And once you take into account the context, then it becomes nonsensical to say that there must always be the same outcome. And then the other one, parents aren't that interested in what goes on at school. It's just free childcare. Actually, I've never met a parent in any circumstances, no matter how challenged, that didn't want their child to do well at school. And I'm sure it's the same for all of you. But we continue to challenge ourselves. We're now doing some work with UNICEF. We're doing some work with a number of countries in Europe to try and continue to refine and adapt the strategies that we're using to make it even better for our children. And it is really difficult coming back after lockdown to re-establish all of that, but we're getting there. Actually, it's feeling much, much better since the Easter holidays, so I'm really pleased about that. That's probably enough of me rambling on. I hope that's been useful. So I'm going to stop there. Michelle.
Thank you, Paul. We've had loads of really positive comments in the chat. No specific questions yet. Has anybody got any questions they want to pop into the chat? Lots of people find it very useful. I wondered whether or not you had any specific strategies, Paul, that you use at Lincoln with regards to supporting migrants, refugees specifically. Obviously, with the Ukraine crisis at the minute, there may well be another influx of migrants into some of our schools. Is there anything that you do specifically around that population of students?
Yeah, I mean, we have a TEFL program in school, so we've got quite a large number of children who don't speak English when they first come to us. So we do have a program for children who don't speak English, and that's really quite helpful to them. But the crucial concerns for those children, of course, is that they don't have a voice. If we're not careful, they don't understand the school, They don't. So the induction of these children is crucial. How do you convey to them what I've just said to you about our ethos when they don't speak our language? How do you show them around the school and make them feel safe and comfortable? How do they know where to go if they're struggling? How would they communicate a safeguarding issue? All of those things are things that worry me about children who don't speak English very well, if the school hasn't got systems for those things to happen. Now, we're lucky. Like I say, I've recruited teachers from Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, all sorts of places. And so we including Russia and the Ukraine, to be honest. So we can cover those issues neatly. We didn't used to be able to. And it was always because I was worried about those things that we put those things in place. But they're the things that people need to worry about, I think. And if you can resolve those things, then the kids are going to do much better. But understanding this in terms of trauma, I mean, if we get children come in, we're going to have children here from the Ukraine, but children from the Ukraine are going to be hugely traumatized. Their behaviors are likely to do all the things that I've just been talking about. And if we can communicate our response to them in the way that I've described, they're going to settle down much easier.
Yeah, very true. One other question. We've got one here. Is there a time where children need to work out of the class? If we were to start a new approach like this, what would be your first steps considering meeting needs of challenging children?
Yeah, no, I think there are lots of times when one of the things that we have is lots of different settings. Okay, so I have lots of my support staff who work with children don't work in the classroom. They don't work in the classroom. And so there are children who aren't coping in the classroom. And when they're not working in the classroom, they're out of the classroom. They're working with the support staff. And the support staff are doing two things. They're resolving the emotional issue that's caused the problem, and they're helping the child to understand the bit of learning that they haven't been able to engage with while they've been in the lesson. And then they're working out how they get them back into the lesson. Now, there are some children who might do that in a lesson. So during the course of a lesson, well, the other thing is our lesson structure is quite different. So we have a 2-hour lesson, a 2-hour lesson, children go to break, a 1-hour lesson, children go to lunch, a 2-hour lesson, the children go home. We experimented a lot about that, but one of the things that children found challenging was lesson change, moving from one teacher to another teacher, setting up a whole new set of things. So reducing the school day down to 3 occasions when that happened was better. So within a 2-hour lesson, for example, a child might be struggling, might need to go out and work with one of the support staff. We'll work with those in the way that I've described. We'll go back in the lesson, and then there's always positive feedback from the teacher. So, and often that feedback comes to me. Child will choose often where the feedback goes, but quite often the kids will say, send an email to Mr. Green. And so I get an email from the teacher saying, just want to let you know, so-and-so had to go out for half an hour, but when he came back, he worked brilliantly. And then I respond to that.
Great.
But they may have other people. But there are other children who may be out for a day, 2 days, 2 weeks sometimes. And then we have another provision within the school for children whose traumatic behavior does tend to lead to quite violent episodes. And they're dealt with by people who are far more specialized in some of this sort of work. But that's avoided those kids being permanently excluded.
Thank you. Right, we've got another question. Do you have any particular strategies to help pupils who have school refused over time?
Yes, but it is a bit relentless, and it is, actually sometimes it will be about, you've got to build that relationship. So where we've got, and we have kids, especially after lockdown, and I'm sure this is why the questions come from. I've still got children who I haven't managed to get back into school yet. From lockdown, but we're picking them off one by one, and it is about developing a relationship between someone in the school and that child, and maybe that child's family. And to start with, that happens in the home. And so some of our support workers spend a period of their time, they might go to the home for an hour, do some work. They might then get the child, they might identify who the child's friends are out of school. They might get the child into school for a fairly safe sort of play activity for an hour. I mean, we're talking secondary age children here, but secondary kids like to play as well. You know, they'll find a hook. They'll find a hook that will give them a reason to come into school. We may do something online with them. Then we'll get them in for a morning. They'll come in for a morning. Everything will be fine. Sometimes they'll come in for just an hour with a parent, or maybe we'll keep them in for a day. And then for the last hour of the day, the parent will come in and sit down and they'll do a jigsaw together. A lot of these children, in our experience, a lot of these children, because their parents are also wrapped up in all sorts of things, the parents and the children don't sit down and do stuff together very often. So creating, and the children love it. And actually the parents love it too. We've had parents who've cried when they've sat down and played with their kids for an hour because if they've not done it, you know, and putting that in for an hour at the end as a bit of a reward, it's building that and strengthening all of those relationships. But it takes time, especially with the kids who post-lockdown don't want to come to school.
Yeah, and I can imagine that that's quite a widespread problem. Who do you have supporting the students in the safe spaces? So is that your teaching assistants or? Yeah,
we don't call them teaching. We don't really. I mean, it's going to sound awful. We don't really call them anything. But there are support staff. Now, some of them. We have another part of the school where we've got kids who don't like going from lesson to lesson to lesson, even if it's only 3 lessons. So we've got some kids, there's about 15 of them in each year group, who work principally with about 2 teachers who cover most of their curriculum, but actually they need that strong relationship with very few people where they can really start to thrive, and so on. Tell me the question again, I missed it.
Who do you have supporting students in the safe spaces? So I think that's like in the Zen Den or, you know, East Island and all that.
So those support staff are there doing that all the time. Then there's other support staff who work with particular groups of children. So in a sense, each a year group of children will have 2 or 3 members of support staff who they know really well, and it'll be one of them. So they'll generally go to that person. These people aren't timetabled for anything. They're just there to support and work with the children as the need arises. And they know that any of the offices around the school are available. Anything can be used. Anything that's empty can be used, and they'll go there. If it's a safe space, they'll go to that safe space. They'll work with the children. I mean, it sounds a bit fluid, but everyone's got radios and stuff, so there's really good communication. So someone might say so and so needs to come out and go to wherever. Is someone around? Is someone available? And someone will go there and work with them.
So it's about communication across the staff.
Flexible, all that.
Linking into that then is the last question. How do you get all of the teachers on board, and are they on board? So that was one of the.
Well, okay. So if you yes, they all tell me they're on board. But look, if you've created a school environment and an ethos where everyone is kind and positive, right? It's really hard not to fit in. And where you have people who don't fit in because they don't want to do that, they look odd. They seem a bit odd. You know, it's really hard to be the grumpy person when everyone else is being positive and supportive. And, you know, I don't recall anyone in the last few years moving on because they didn't like working in the school where everyone was positive and supportive. I mean, people always comment about how positive and supportive the ethos is in school. People do move on. They go to promoted posts. Sometimes they come back. One of the things that's really exciting is 6 of my teachers were students in the school. And so I've known them since they were 11.
Amazing. So they're very much on board and used to the system that's been in place.
I think most people are on board because I don't think there's nothing bad about it.
If any of the delegates on here this evening are working in a school that isn't trauma informed and doesn't, as a rule, adopt a lot of the practices that you are adopting and that have been so successful at Linghall, are there things that you would recommend that they could do specifically just as a personal piece of action to try and support students? So if that's not necessarily the overriding ethos of the school environment and the leadership of
Yep.
the school. What little things do you think particularly you could focus on?
Be kind and be positive. Even if one person does those things, then I guarantee, I'll come back to this book again, really good, because the whole premise of this book is, why is it that there are always some teachers in a school that the most challenging children work with really, really well, when they don't work really well with everybody else? And undoubtedly it comes back to the fact that those teachers will be kind, they'll be positive, and they'll have built good trust-based relationships with those children over time, and and the kids will respond, and the kids will make those decisions on a teacher by teacher basis. And what you hope for is, in my school, that every lesson that they go to, they're going to get the same response. But they will know, if you're the only teacher in the school who behaves in that way, you'll be the teacher who the other people are saying, how come those kids behave with you, but they don't behave with anybody else?
That's it. We've got a comment here. Exactly. It's relationships, good relationships that make progress, which is so true, isn't it? And something that everybody can bring to their environment. Here's a question. What if you don't know what a student's particular trauma is? And it could be that a lot of staff don't know the specifics. Would this affect the trauma sensitive approach, or is it a generic approach?
No, because in a way, understanding the issues is slightly further down the line, but it is something that we do. One of the other dimensions of our work is that we become a sort of outreach citizens advice bureau, so that we can actually address some of the primary issues that are causing the trauma. That's really good and supportive for the parents. As far as the children are concerned, they might tell you, they might not, but actually the solutions are the same. Actually, the solutions are all the same. And it's about, if you show empathy, if you show kindness, understanding, positivity, and make it really clear that you actually want them to be successful, you want them to learn, you want them to feel that your lessons are engaging and motivating, all of those things, then it doesn't matter what the issue is, you'll be reducing that extraneous load. They will start to learn better. That'll make them feel better. Boom.
Job done. Last question. Interested to know more about how we can help new students / refugees communicate safeguarding issues and any specific support available for them. So if there are people struggling with English as a first language, are there any strategies that you would use at Linghall that other people can?
There is one thing. Look, it is a real difficulty and a real worry. There is an app for the iPad called Say Hi, and it's great because you can. What it does is you open the app, Say Hi, and you give it 2 languages. So you tell it that there's going to be first respondent and second respondent. So I might put in first respondent is English, second respondent is Romanian. Okay. So what will happen is then I will speak to the iPad. The iPad will then speak what I've said in Romanian. The second respondent will then reply in Romanian, and the iPad will speak in English. Doesn't always get it perfectly right, but we've tested it with loads of our EL kids. Had quite a lot of fun with it as well, I have to say. But it really helps. If there's something serious to be communicated, it does enable a level of communication. We use it a lot with parents, but it does enable a level of communication when you can't speak the language. Say Hi, I'd say is really good.
Is that a free app or something that
I don't. Do you know what? I don't know, but if it's not, it's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth the investment, particularly with parents as well, isn't it? I imagine. So amazing. Any last questions for Paul? Just before we go, there's lots of people saying thank you, and that it's been really timely and really useful CPD. I think if that's cool for questions.
I'm more than happy, Michelle. If people want to email me directly, I'm more than happy to respond. No problem at all.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, so what we'll do is we'll leave it there for now. We will upload the recording. It will be on saved on as a YouTube video that we will be able to share with delegates. Are you happy for us to share the slides, Paul?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, it'll be on the recording anyway, won't it? So we're happy to share those. And yeah, and I can include your email address if anybody wants to find out more.
No problem.
Hopefully everybody's found that really really helpful, really inspirational. As I say, I've worked on and off with Paul for many years, and constantly just really enthused and impressed with just the work that happens in that whole school community. A really holistic approach to improving the life chances of those kids and the families. And I'm just really pleased that everybody's been so positive, and I'm looking at all these comments now, people finding it really, really useful. So very, very grateful for you doing this for us, Paul. I will share those slides and resources with you in the next couple of days. Interesting that you've mentioned the Decisive Element book. We work pretty closely with Gary Toward, who is one of the authors of that book. We've done some similar training sessions with him in the past. If there's an appetite for people to maybe jump on a session, we can get Gary to potentially come and do a similar session with us. Yeah, relentlessly positive. And that's always a good thing, isn't it? So thanks again, Paul. Thanks for everybody jumping on and joining us. And yeah, we'll circulate all that information. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.